Hello, Saints. We're in Galatians still. We're in chapter 3. Today we're going to start part 1 of 2 of the intent of the law. This is in Galatians 3, chapter 3, verses 15 to 18. And Paul begins to write. We were talking about what faith brings. That faith brings righteousness before. But now we're going to talk about the intent of the law. We're getting close to that part of chapter 3 that was really important in the 1888 Minneapolis Conference. So beginning in verse 15, we read, "Brethren, I speak in terms of human relations." He's not trying to speak high and mighty theological language and stuff. He's trying to talk in relationship with people and give an example that all people can understand, hopefully. He says, even though it is only a man's covenant, talking about when you make a covenant with somebody, even though it's just human, he says, yet when it's been ratified, he says, no one sets it aside or adds conditions to it. The contract signed, that's what it is. He says, now the promises were spoken to Abraham, and he's going back to Genesis 15 primarily, where Abraham believed God, and God counted it to him as righteousness, where Abraham was justified. So he says, now the promises were spoken to Abraham and to his seed. He does not say, and to seeds, as referring to many, but rather to one, as to the seed, that is, Christ. So he's connecting the covenant with Abraham to the coming of the Messiah. He says in verse 17, what I am saying is this. The law, which came 430 years later, does not invalidate a covenant previously ratified by God, so as to nullify the promise. So what happened on Mount Sinai didn't nullify what he did with Abram, back in chapter 15 of Genesis. In fact, Mount Sinai was the renewal of the Abrahamic covenant. It wasn't something different. So he says in verse 18, he concludes, for if the inheritance is based on law, the law that was given at Sinai, is no longer based on the promise. But God had granted it to Abraham by means of a promise. So there's a promise in there. And the promise is not based on the law. The law was given because it's the covenant contract. We'll talk more about that at another time. But what we see here is a continuation. Now, I've noticed in dispensational books, the people believe in the secret rapture and stuff, that they show a schema of the covenants. And the covenant with Abraham and the covenant with Christ at the cross jumps over the covenant of Mount Sinai. It's not even connected. The covenant at Mount Sinai is shown in their chart to be hanging virtually in midair, connected to nothing else, as if this was an interim thing waiting for something else to happen. Clearly, Paul doesn't see it that way. Clearly, Paul sees it as a continuation of the promise made to Abraham. It didn't nullify that law. It didn't nullify that covenant. It is the promise, and he brought the promise at Mount Sinai. We're going to continue with this now on the next question. Why at Sinai? Why the law then? And that's where we'll pick it up next time. Blessings.